Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther. Is that somebody you? How many says that's me? I want to go a little farther. Greatness shows up after you're tired. Let's say it one more time, man. Greatness shows up after you're tired, not when you're tired. And breakthroughs don't happen until you reach your breaking point. Been there many times, man, at that place I didn't want to go on, and I realized that strength can't develop until your strength is gone. You got to keep pushing, because character and courage is developed or lost when you decide to keep going or to give up. You see, that's the point. You got to stop, and you got to realize that's your breakthrough coming right there, because when others that are around you won't, you will be the one that goes ahead. Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther. Is that somebody you? How many says that's me? I want to go a little farther. Greatness shows up after you're tired. Let's say it one more time, man. Greatness shows up after you're tired, not when you're tired. And breakthroughs don't happen until you reach your breaking point. Been there many times, man, at that place I didn't want to go on, and I realized that strength can't develop until your strength is gone. You got to keep pushing, because character and courage is developed or lost when you decide to keep going or to give up. You see, that's the point. You got to stop, and you got to realize that's your breakthrough coming right there, because when others that are around you won't, you will be the one that goes ahead. Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther. Is that somebody you? How many says that's me? I want to go a little farther. Greatness shows up after you're tired. Let's say it one more time, man. Greatness shows up after you're tired, not when you're tired. And breakthroughs don't happen until you reach your breaking point. Been there many times, man, at that place I didn't want to go on, and I realized that strength can't develop until your strength is gone. You got to keep pushing, because character and courage is developed or lost when you decide to keep going or to give up. You see, that's the point. You got to stop, and you got to realize that's your breakthrough coming right there, because when others that are around you won't, you will be the one that goes ahead. Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther. Is that somebody you? How many says that's me? I want to go a little farther. Greatness shows up after you're tired. Let's say it one more time, man. Greatness shows up after you're tired, not when you're tired. And breakthroughs don't happen until you reach your breaking point. Been there many times, man, at that place I didn't want to go on, and I realized that strength can't develop until your strength is gone. You got to keep pushing, because character and courage is developed or lost when you decide to keep going or to give up. You see, that's the point. You got to stop, and you got to realize that's your breakthrough coming right there, because when others that are around you won't, you will be the one that goes ahead. Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther. Is that somebody you? How many says that's me? I want to go a little farther. Greatness shows up after you're tired. Let's say it one more time, man. Greatness shows up after you're tired, not when you're tired. And breakthroughs don't happen until you reach your breaking point. Been there many times, man, at that place I didn't want to go on, and I realized that strength can't develop until your strength is gone. You got to keep pushing, because character and courage is developed or lost when you decide to keep going or to give up. You see, that's the point. You got to stop, and you got to realize that's your breakthrough coming right there, because when others that are around you won't, you will be the one that goes ahead. Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther.
Into the virtual statewide town hall. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Sherwood, and I wanted to come to you tonight with a few thoughts, because we got a lot of upcoming, very, very important issues, not just across our nation, but across the state of Oklahoma. The purpose of tonight's virtual town hall is to give you a lot of information, and there's a lot of subject matter, which I'll go over in a minute, and I'll comment on each of them with the endeavor to give you a little bit of wisdom and a little bit of knowledge. And now let's understand that knowledge is great, but if we don't know how to use knowledge correctly, knowledge is resorted to nothing more than foolishness. However, if we know how to use knowledge correctly, then knowledge can be something that we see progress into this thing called wisdom, which is the most valuable thing of all. I want to begin with a quote that I think summarizes where we want to go tonight, and then I'll talk about the agenda. And I will tell you that we will have a open Q&A session tonight on our Facebook live feed. I'll be monitoring those questions. So begin to go there right now. You'll see the Facebook site. I'll just point that out for you very quickly. It's Mark Sherwood for Hope, Health, and Freedom. Formerly Mark Sherwood for Oklahoma Governor, same site, one and the same. If you go there right now, you will actually see an opportunity for yourself to go ahead and populate the questions with the subject matter, because we're going to address each of these difficult subject matters head on tonight that many are plaguing this country. I'm going to begin with a quote from Samuel Adams, and I'll preface this by saying the founders knew exactly what they were doing. They were able to look ahead and foresee difficulties. They were able to foresee problems. They were able to foresee tyranny. They were able to foresee the fall of this constitutional republic should we not maintain certain principles. I quote from Samuel Adams, "For no people will namely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight and without the aid of foreign invaders." Now, I will tell you this, it is definitely to the best interest of the tyrants that are today to reduce the people to simple ignorance and vice. For they, meaning they, tyrants, cannot live in a country where virtue and knowledge prevail. Did you hear that, folks? The tyrants cannot live in a country where virtue and knowledge prevail. Integrity and knowledge is a hard thing today. As I put the remarks I'm going to say tonight in context, I will tell you firsthand that I learned an immense amount of information and knowledge that I did not know and that I perhaps need to know better in the campaign that we recently ended. But I should preface it with this as well. Our campaign never ends. We're still in the quest to give people information so that they can go a little bit further and do a little bit more. You see, we get stuck in this idea of contentment. We get stuck in this idea of just average. We hold our bar down here of performance and accept that as the best we can do. But folks, that's not the best we can do. Some would say that our expectation with the ability to save this country is beyond repair. But I do not hold that expectation. I'm still going to believe, even if I'm the last guy standing, because even if I'm the last guy standing, I'm still going to be asking people the same question that the intro show tonight. Who's going to step up and go a little bit further? Who's going to go more? Who's going to do a little bit more for truth, for virtue, for wisdom, and for this thing that is going to make tyrants flee? I'm not going to be part of the problem. I refuse. I want to be part of the solution. And that's why we're here tonight. Because I'm not stopping. We're not stopping, because the mission we begun is not a mission that is one that ends. It's a mission that just begins. We're talking about a lot of subjects tonight. First of all, I'm going to go through a little bit of a table of contents, if you will. We're talking about the election upcoming, both federal and state. We're talking about the transgender issue that's really out there right now in the world, and we'll talk a lot about that. I'll give you some thoughts. The abortion issue, I think, is one that is very much in discussion still today. We will see that not end anytime soon. We'll talk about the Constitution. We'll talk about leadership. We'll talk about the tribes in Oklahoma specifically. Many of you listening here are from Oklahoma, and I appreciate you very much. And I'll give you some thoughts on those. They have recently came out with an open endorsement, and I'll comment on that in a moment. We'll talk about border security. We'll talk about real threats to our country. I've got some thoughts on that as well. We'll talk about an event coming up. And just a reminder, I'll remind you of this right now and at the end. The 24th, which is next Monday at Spring Hill Suites in the Oklahoma City area, there's an event that was organized by several grassroots organizations around the state of Oklahoma. It'll be starting at 6 o'clock p.m. and ending at 8 p.m. It's an event centered around people that are concerned about the future of Oklahoma. Yes, the grassroots conservative people who are really wanting to make a difference. I encourage you to go there. Again, Spring Hill Suites, the 24th, next Monday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And again, we'll talk about more upcoming events such as this if you deem appropriate. Now, I am monitoring questions again on the feed right here, so I want you to begin to populate those as you have a thought. And if there's any that the moderator or the producer behind me that I'm not catching needs to be asked, feel free to go ahead and ask me, and I'll try to get to those questions as well. First of all, the election. I want to get right to that. I think that that's an important issue. There's a lot of people out here on both sides of the aisle that are putting lock, stock, and barrel into the salvation or demise of our country with the upcoming November election. Let me just put a little bit of that to rest. Our country will not rise or fall upon this one election. Our country will rise and fall upon premises from which the people maintain. I'm going to say that one more time. Our country will not rise and fall based upon the results of the election. Our country will rise and fall on the premises of which its people maintain. There is an order that you must really maintain, folks. It's the order of the way things are supposed to be. You know, God's about order. So the order is God, man, society, and then government. So therefore, the people are the real governors of the government. That's the way it's supposed to be, and I'll prove that to you in a minute through the Constitution. We need to get out and vote on the upcoming November election from a state and federal level. Let us understand that our vote does count. Now, I get it. Election integrity is still up in the air. I get it. But if we don't vote, not voting is worse than any election fraud there could be, because that meant that we take one vote out of the equation. If they want to cheat, that's one less vote they had to remove. So let us understand that we have to get out there and vote. Let us overwhelm them, and let us really have the idea that our vote does count. Look, the election system is not fixed. We know that. We know it's nowhere near integrous like we want it to be. A lot to be done, but it's what we have right now. Failing to participate in that is failing to be a part of the solution and choosing therein to be a part of the problem. And I don't want to be a part of the problem, so I'll be voting in the upcoming November election just in a couple weeks here. Now, with that said, let us understand that a lot of people are putting the emphasis on the federal elections. Who controls the House? Who controls the Senate? I get that. I understand that. But let us understand a little bit of Constitution here. I'm going to read to you from this book. It's a Constitution I carried around with me for many, many, many months. And I'm just going to read to you the 10th Amendment. And I'm going to prove a point to you that you really will never forget. The 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution here, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So, what powers are written in the Constitution already that the United States holds and the states don't? You've got to go back a few sections to Article 1, Section 8. You can look this up for yourself, Article 1, Section 8. In this section, Congress powers are laid out. So, again, we're looking at the idea of the federal election part. We're coming back to state in just a minute, so hang with me. Congress power is laid out right here in Article 1, Section 8. And there are a total of 18 powers. I encourage you to read it for yourself. There's 18. I'm not going to read these to you tonight, but read them for yourself. Get yourself a copy of the Constitution. If Congress has 18 powers, why do we act like they have 1,800? Folks, we need to wake up and realize they don't have that much power. The states and the people have the power. Once again, order, God, man, society, government. It is not government, man. What did Samuel Adams say? If he could reduce the people to ignorance, then we will destroy ourselves from the inside out. Ignorance will allow us to be destroyed without the help of any foreign invaders. I just flipped that statement around so you'd get this. So we don't need to be ignorant. Don't be ignorant. With the federal elections coming up, realize what you're voting for. Ask the persons whom you are voting for if they even know their own rights, if they even know their own powers are supposed to do. Look, we spend a lot of time hearing ads on TV that really mean nothing, just a smokescreen. What really matters is, are the people we elect going to stand up for the principles of this document, and which stands up for and represents the principles of the people? And if they don't, we cannot vote for them. Now, I realize we're in a place right now where, because of politics and because it's driven by this thing called money and it's over people, we have a lot of people that are being nominated from various parties that have no business representing anybody. They're just getting rich and they're becoming power-hungry monsters, it seems to be these days. But folks, we got to vote, and vote for the one that you believe best represents this document and you and your rights as people of these United States of America. Now, having said that, just because someone has an R after their name and just because someone has a D after their name does not mean anything, because people flip-flop parties because they're looking for support from certain people groups. They're not looking for support based upon righteousness. They're looking for support based upon who will get them into elected offices and who will keep them there. In other words, there's a big difference between politicians and statesmen. When you get an opportunity to vote for a statesman or a stateswoman, vote for the statesman and stateswoman, forget the politicians. There is no real difference anymore between the Republicans and Democrats in many, many ways. They both lost their way. I spent my time traveling around Oklahoma with the Oklahoma GOP platform stance. And it was rare when I even found anyone that was in office or running for office that had ever read that document. So just because someone has an R or D after their name does not mean that they represent the values of even the respective parties or the Constitution. And they may not even know. So don't let that surprise you. It should make you a little bit grieved, I get that, but don't let that surprise you. Ask the questions and vote. Now, let's get into the Oklahoma election just a little bit. The office that I was seeking, the office of governor, now has a couple of front-running candidates. Governor Stitt, who is listed as a Republican, and challenger Joy Hoffmeister, who's listed as a Democrat. There's also a Libertarian candidate, Natalie Bruno, and there's an independent candidate, Urban Yen. When I look at this election from the standpoint of who is best, it's a hard one because, as you know, I had much differences with Governor Stitt. But since he got more votes than I did, I choose to support him for this particular position because I do feel like he's going to do less damage potentially than challenger Joy Hoffmeister. Now, having said that, Joy Hoffmeister, I believe last fall actually was a Republican, switched to Democrat. I don't really know why that was. I don't know her personally, but that to me represents a little bit of a wishy-washy place to be in life. Now, I've watched both of them talk, and it's very interesting in their dynamic. There's a bunch of attacks going back and forth. And it seems to be to me, this is just an observation, that when you look at Kevin Stitt versus Joy Hoffmeister, I'm not neglecting the other two candidates at all. I'm just saying that odds are those two are going to be up the top. I mean, we all know that because of the way the voters are shaped in Oklahoma. It's not much of a challenge for me to say that Governor Stitt is the best of the two because at least he's been somewhat consistent in the inconsistencies. I mean, I don't mean that in a slamming way, but I'm going to put my vote towards Governor Kevin Stitt in the November gubernatorial election of Oklahoma. Now, that's very important to understand. Again, I'm not sure Kevin Stitt knows this Constitution. I'm not even sure he knows the GOP platform stance. But I do know that he has signed at least multiple bills that the supermajority Congress in Oklahoma has presented him. Some he hasn't signed, like accountability. I get that. But the majority of the Second Amendment bills that have been presented to him, as well as the abortion bill, which is a big hot topic, which I'll address in just a moment, he did sign that as well. Now, granted, he didn't lead the way on, didn't lead the charge like I would have liked him to, but he did sign the bill. So, based upon those things right there, I encourage you as a conservative person to hear my heart on this and do your own homework. But I don't mind telling you that I'm going to cast my vote, as well as my wife, for Kevin Stitt to have another term as governor of Oklahoma. Now, having said that, there are numerous races beneath him. There's the one with the education secretary. There's a couple of candidates running for that. I know Ryan Walters is out there. I have talked to Ryan. He has pledged to me personally that he would stand up against things such as CRT in schools, and I'm going to choose to believe him. I looked him in the eye, and I just believe that I'm going to give him an opportunity, so I'm going to be voting for him. With the other candidates, I won't get into all of them, but when you look at Congress and Senate, I do know Josh Burkeen very well. I do know Mark Wayne Mullen fairly well. Josh Burkeen is a godly man. If you live in the area, you need to be voting for him and send him to Congress. Mark Wayne Mullen, I know him a little bit. I've met him and his wife, Christy, a few times. Seems like a nice guy. Again, I know he's seems to be more establishment. But again, what do you have here? Do you want an R in there, or do you want a D in there? Do you want a leaning R, or do you want a leaning D? What we have right now is a bunch of leaning R's, maybe. And we'll take that. And I think that's the best we can do to Congress. Under that context, however, know that this matters. 18 powers is what Congress has. Article 1, Section 8, the states and the people hold the power. And so really keep that in mind, folks, as you go forward. And again, I'm going to be monitoring the questions. I appreciate you guys very much that we've got on here. There's been a few comments. Let me just take a quick look in here. I understand what people are saying, lesser of two evils, but we cannot choose to not vote. If we choose to not vote, our voice won't be counted. And I'm totally with you on that. I don't like the choices either sometimes. I don't really like the idea of that, but I think that that's the best, and people can differ from that. And I certainly understand that, and I respect that opinion. People can abstain too. And again, I respect you for that. I'm going to choose to not abstain because my opinion is, it's like everybody else's, it's what the beauty of America is. We can have awesome, amazing dialogue and even disagreement, so we can still love each other because we still want to save this country. So anyway, the bottom line is we have election issues, we have candidate issues, but those are the way that I've seen the candidates line out. Now, let me address the transgender issue. It's a hot button right now across the state, and I know we get that. Unfortunately, we have opened the door in our country to this behavior that does not line up with what I believe, frankly, to be the nature of mankind. I believe there's a male and there's a female, and I believe that at birth, because when you have the sperm that inseminates the egg, we have this brand new cell created that has the DNA of two people. To me, that's the cell can live by itself. I mean, maybe it's not in the form of a human being, but the cell can live by itself because it has a nucleus where the male and female, the 23 chromosomes of each sort of merge. It has a mitochondria, which is its power source, and it has a cell membrane, which is able to allow things in and out. And so because of that, we have this male and female. Now, we've opened the door to the idea of being able to choose. In other words, the sky is blue unless you decide that it's green, and the earth is round unless you decide it's rectangle. And so we've allowed these belief systems to come in. What we can imagine can become real. And that's where we are right now. I've learned something very, very powerful, though, is that laws do not legislate morality and laws don't create righteousness. People are going to do what they're going to do regardless. I wish that there was no transgender type surgeries in this country. But the facts are this, folks, they're going to be done in this country because we've opened the door for that in this country. We've allowed a mindset of vile, perverted thinking to come in. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't love those people. I absolutely do. I do not agree with their lifestyle choice. I don't agree with what they're doing to their bodies. Certainly think it's a crime, if you want my opinion, straight up about a parent allowing a child to do that, or any state to allow a child to do that. If you can't buy beer, you certainly cannot decide if you're a male or female and decide to, mutilate yourself either through demasculinization or hormone therapy. Now, having said that, as I stated a moment ago, that does go on in our country and it will continue to go on in our country because we've opened the door for that. I encourage everyone in Oklahoma to encourage your legislature, whether that be your representative or your senator, to present and author bills that would ban that type of surgical or hormonal procedure in Oklahoma, regardless of parental consent. Why? Because of what I just said. If you can't go out here and even get a driver's license or buy beer at a certain age or even buy a firearm, well, you certainly can't make a decision that could alter the scope and trajectory of your life at an earlier age. So that's a thought on the transgender. Now, having said that, here's what I want you to keep in mind with the idea of governor. Okay, hear my heart with this. Let's say we don't vote and we abstain, or we don't participate in the election. And let's say we have a governor who happens to be sitting in a place contrary to everything I just said about transgender. We could continue to put bills out there and they could continue to be vetoed. So there's that angle to think about. So always think about that going in and make good decisions. But the bottom line is encourage your representatives to represent you and your best interests within your districts, wherever you are, whether that be in Oklahoma or anywhere around the country for that matter. The issue of abortion. This is a big one. I stood on this principle because, look, folks, I was, I was a product of a rape situation. Many of you know that. And I don't look at that like a big old blessing in a sense. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad to be speaking with you tonight, but I'm also very aware of and cognizant of the gift that I was given because somebody chose to give me life. Now, I'm not a lady. I don't know how a lady would feel if she was raped and was impregnated by a man. I don't know how I would feel if I was parents of a 10-year-old girl who was raped by an illegal immigrant. Don't know how I'd feel and was impregnated. I don't know. I'm not a lady. I've tried to put myself in the position of understanding, but I can't. Even in the campaign, I would many times draw a hard line and say, we got to stop this. We got to stop this. And I want to stop it. I do. But I realized something very powerful over the course of the last couple of months. I don't have the power to change a person's heart. I don't. I wish I did, but I don't. That would be manipulation. I would do everything I could to stop that type of behavior. And people have asked, well, what about exceptions for rape or incest? Again, I look at my own life and I think, well, I'm not a mistake. And I don't think life is a mistake. But that issue is so challenging, even for me to get my arms around and wrestle. As a man and where I stand, that's what I believe. But I really, if I'm out there talking to a lady, and I've talked to several who didn't believe that, and, all I can say is we have to just work through the dialogue and understand the differences and understand that there's people that don't like that and there's people that do like that. It's become such a divisive issue across our country. But we got here because of this, folks. When Roe v. Wade was made the practice of the land and the laws of the states followed, The laws of the states followed because the states did not know the Constitution. In other words, we dug ourselves our own hole. We allowed it to happen. And then when we got a chance to start digging out, we were already so far dug in the hole that we don't know how to get out. Now, I'm giving you a little bit of wisdom here because many people thought that Roe v. Wade was going to be an automatic, that abortion is going to be overturned. No, because Roe v. Wade did not overturn abortion. It just pushed it back to the states where it was originally. And the states should have never allowed that, but they did. And they, again, just like transgender, opened the door. When you open the door to thoughts like that, evil thoughts, in my opinion, they will continue to grow. And to think that we can make laws to stop them from growing is ridiculous. Again, laws need to be passed, and the states can do that. And so you want to support states that have the courage to do that. But just know this, it's not going to stop it across our country because somebody's going to cross the state line to get it done. And there are going to be insurance companies paying for it. And some organizations are going to pay people to go do it. That's the world we live in. And I hate it. I don't like it a bit. Good comments here. I just want to read a couple. I appreciate David, stand firm with no exceptions. That's where I am. It's like, I don't know what we're going to do about our country now other than stand firm where we are individually. And I'll get to that in a minute when I talk about the idea of self-government. It's an idea that I want to hit hard on a moment. And I'm going to spend some time on this in a moment, folks, because I want to cover a lot of ground tonight. So self-government's coming. This is a big deal. And so, again, we as people, even though, and hear my heart with this, when you get to these elections, these issues like transgender and abortion, I get it. Oklahoma and other states like that are not going to win. I really, really get that. But ladies and gentlemen, as people, we don't have to lose. As individual people, we don't have to lose. What I'm saying to you is this: whatever direction the country goes in, whatever direction the states goes in, do your part, stand your ground, and you are not a loser because you stood your ground. Many people said to me, oh, you ran a good race the election, you lost. It's like, we didn't lose. We just didn't get enough votes in that particular election. And, isn't standing up for the fight and answering the call to get in the game, isn't that a win? And that's all I'm asking you to do. Get in the game, because that's the idea where people can win. So I've talked about the election. I've talked about transgender. I've talked about abortion. I've talked a little bit about the Constitution. Now I want to talk about the tribes in general. I spent probably 9-10 months trying to build a relationship with the tribes. The tribes were people that were here before the colonists of America got here. The colonists of America began to take the land of the tribes and begin to move them around the country. And you all know the story. What a heartbreaking stories they were. The Trail of Tears is one that is very well remembered here in the idea where we live in Oklahoma. Oklahoma was designed to be an Indian state where the tribes lived. 39 tribes live in Oklahoma. I learned that. Amazing. I met many of the leaders, many of the people, solid people, but they're all people, man. We may have different colors of skin or different heritage, but we're people. Tried to build those relationships. But I learned a couple powerful things. And the tribes just absolutely, just so you know, and it's most of you do know, the 5 civilized tribes unanimously stood up and endorsed Joy Hoffmeister to be the next governor. And they are pledging support behind her and putting a lot of funds behind that and effort. Now, the question we've got to look at right here is what happened and who's guiding the decisions? Well, unfortunately, this is what I've observed. The tribes receive a good amount of money from the federal government. And the federal government, in its ability to support, pretend to support, however you want to look at that, they continue to pour a lot of money into the tribes. And at the same time you got that going on, you had a lawsuit happening. When you get lawsuits involved, you get attorneys involved. And then when you got the current regime of Oklahoma, the governor's office, that went on the attack against the tribe instead of building a relationship with them, you had a perfect storm. And that storm began to swell and brew till it became nothing more than a hurricane. There was no winning it for anybody. So the relationship between Governor Stitt and the tribes was completely severed. And the tribes are still taking money from big government, including big Democratic Party money. Now, at that moment in time, what are they going to do? Are they going to all of a sudden try to push back and get into Governor Stitt's graces? No, because they believe this is a right they have, these sovereign lands they have here in Oklahoma. So they've endorsed Joy Hofmeister. My opinion is she's done nothing more than say the right things to placate their vote, and they have fallen for the oldest trap of all times. They have fallen for the emotion of backing somebody for the wrong reasons. And I feel like they are backing a Democratic challenger because they didn't know how to find or back the right representative to support them. And again, myself and some others tried to build a relationship with them with no effect whatsoever. Although I think they're wonderful people, I was not able to bridge those gaps very well, probably because I had an R after my name and because there's distrust there. And again, can't fix that, but you do the best you can. But having said that, hear my heart with the tribes. And if there's any tribal leaders listening to me, hear my heart with this. If you are completely dependent upon the federal government for your existence, you are in bondage still. Isn't it time you get out of bondage? Isn't it time you stood up? Isn't it time you said, you know what? I appreciate your help, but I don't want that help anymore. I don't need that as far as a dependent help. Because when you become dependent, as Samuel Adams says, you may have already become ignorant to the tyranny that is. The tyrants want to control you. They want to push you to do what they want to do, and they would do nothing. It would not please them any more than to push you to help push Oklahoma blue, to get them to do what they want. And it's all for the wrong motives. When anger drives decisions, typical decisions end up in the wrong area. So I want you to kind of think about that, folks. When you look at the tribes, we have to begin to understand Oklahoma needs a relationship with them. I don't know what it's going to take. Hopefully, a new administration at some point in time will be able to do that. But it needs to be about individuals sitting down at a table as people first, as citizens of Americans first, and then working on the differences later. That's the way our country is built. It's not based upon everybody being the same cookie cutter people. Nope. It's based upon working through differences despite the differences. That's the beauty of our country. Good comment. I appreciate you, Matt, saying life is not a mistake no matter how it was conceived. I really believe the idea, what you're saying with abortion, I'm going to comment on this, that the mother's life, if that was in danger, of course, you do the best you can to save the life. I think as I've looked at these abortion laws, I can't see any of them that are restricting that from physicians to saving a mama's life or even a child's life in the reverse order. So, it's like we need to understand that clarity is what we need. We need attorney generals in each state to really clarify what the laws mean so that people will know how to look at them and how to do them. That's important. Now, when you look at the border security, the borders are open. There's basically three groups that are trying to get here. One, there's a group trying to come over here because America is still the greatest country ever, and we still have the great American dream for opportunity. Those people are amazing. They look at it and try to do it the right way. There's a second group, people just coming over here to flood this area that are driven over here by groups that don't necessarily like America, like China, like some of the Arab nations, to come over here and begin to flood the country. And the Democrats are happy letting them in under the idea of sympathy. We want to help you. We empathize with you. We want you to come in. They're allowing them to come in because they're looking for votes. It's a cheap way to infuse under the idea of sympathy support, and that's what they're doing. They don't care about what it does because their crave for power is so strong they're willing to compromise the safety of the nation to hang on to their power. Why do I say that? Because coyotes are hauling people across the border all the time for money, and money is driving across the border. The cartel partnering with China to bring across the border of America fentanyl. The fentanyl crisis is pathetic. It's pathetic. Do you realize that about 1/15th dust, the size of a copper penny, is enough fentanyl to kill someone? Do you realize that fentanyl is mainly made in China and Mexico, some in I think Saudi Arabia, or no, India is another area, and it's filtered here so that it will get our country hooked and addicted on opiates. Do you realize that the fentanyl right now is being shaped and processed into candy-like substances that look like Skittles for children? And here we have Halloween coming up. Do you realize that 108,000 Americans died over the last 12 months with fentanyl overdoses, which was more than car wrecks, COVID, and firearms? Unbelievable, isn't it? And that's going under the radar. Oh, we sacrifice and lock down our borders for such things as COVID, but we won't for fentanyl? We won't for drugs? No, we won't, because we want the support and we want the votes. It's disgusting. However, said that, the United States of America is supposed to secure its borders. But when they don't, guess what? There are states. States should support their borders. They should secure their borders. The state of Texas should secure their borders. Arizona, etc., California. And we should secure those borders all the way around because the states have borders too. People should have borders. Counties should have borders. Cities should have borders like they do. And states should secure their borders. We have a massive crisis on our hand, folks, and it's not okay. Again, who's our enemies? Let me just talk about the threats. And I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm going to say some things right now that I want you to really think about. And I'm going to get to some questions, a lot of them here. So thank you so much for bringing those in, guys. Very good job. Very, very good job. When you look at the threats that are in America, I'm going to pose a couple of situations for you. Is it China? Is it Iran? Is it Mexico? Is it COVID-19? Is it the World Economic Forum? Is it Klaus Schwab? Is it Yuval Noah Harari? Is it Elon Musk? Is it Bill Gates? You see, the list could go on and on. Is it Joe Biden, his administration? Is it Kamala Harris? Is it Nancy Pelosi? Who is and who are the threats really of America? We know that there's organizations out there right now that are trying to destroy this nation. We know the organizations such as the CCP leadership, not so much the people, but the leadership, has a mission to expand the Chinese empire once again. You've heard the speeches that people do. You understand that, don't you? A communist is about control. Americans in our government, our constitutional republic, is about the people being the governors of the government, not the governor governing the people. See, the governor is supposed to govern the Constitution, and the people are supposed to be the governor of the governor. And that's the way it was supposed to work. But the Chinese Communist Party wants to destroy that. We will never be destroyed from the outside in because we've got guns. The Second Amendment, that's right. The Second Amendment. And I'm going to read that to you just real quick because I think you need to understand that. Again, under the idea of who's the real threat, Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. I'm going to repeat that one more time. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Why is that so important? Because that is the crux and the key to holding the Constitution together. Without the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the right of speech, and you can see there's 5 rights packed in there. Religion, free speech, the press, peacefully assemble, and to position the government for redress of grievances. Folks, our First Amendment rights have already been historically violated over the last 2 years. And we, because we didn't know the Constitution, allowed it to happen. And why is that important? Under the idea of who's the real enemy, who's the real threat? Earth shattering news, even though China, Iran, and some people from within are the real threats that we know about. The true threat, folks, is ourselves. It's our own self. We have failed to know our own rights. We have become apathetic to not getting involved. I am just as guilty as anybody else, but I'm not going to be guilty anymore. As I sit right here tonight in our own studio speaking my heart to you, I'm not going to be guilty of being apathetic anymore. I cannot do it because you can't unknow what you know. So when you know something, you've got to internalize it, and you can't actually forget like you know this thing. You can't forget what you know. It's impossible to unknow what you know. Folks, we're at a place in time where the greatest enemy that we have in America is not these other countries. It's ourselves. And you want to know why it's ourselves? It's because we've allowed ourselves to become the governed, to become the peasants instead of the government and instead of the people. I'm going to say that one more time. We've allowed ourselves to become the governed and the peasants instead of the governors and the people. And because of that, here we are, not knowing how to self-govern, and the lack of self-governance is the real enemy of all of us as people. What is self-government, you say? It's the ability to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, I can exist without a check from big government. I can exist without food from big government. I can exist without anything from big government. I don't need it. I can go out here and make a living on my own. I can go to work. Now I get it. Don't say, Mark, what about the people that are disabled? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the able-bodied Americans who have the ability to self-govern. We've allowed that idea, that concept to go away. Remember the idea of working for a living? Remember the idea of showing to work 15 minutes early because that was on time? Remember the idea of staying late because you had a duty to do your job, as if you had some pride in that? Remember the idea of standing up for the flag regardless of what was coming your way and coming against your day, and pledging allegiance to the United States of America and to the country which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One nation, under God, indivisible. Nothing's going to divide us, with liberty or freedom and justice for all. Folks, freedom and liberty, earth-shattering news, cannot occur in true form without self-government. And self-government cannot occur without the idea of a moral compass. And that moral compass is God himself. You say, is this going to be a gospel message? No, it's not. But it's a message that's not going to fail to acknowledge God as he was acknowledged, as the founders talked about him, as he gave them the vision to found this constitutional republic. Folks, we live in a quagmire of a world today. We don't know how to self-govern, and we are our own enemies. I'm asking you to consider getting involved more, to become part of the solution. Even if you don't know what to do something. Don't throw your hands up and say, I give. Don't quit. Don't give up, and don't surrender. Just as I was talking about at the beginning of this town hall, we need to look around and encourage somebody to get up and go a little bit farther. Because when you're tired, that's when courage starts getting developed. Some days I'm tired of fighting, and I know you are too. But we need to stand up, because if we don't stand up, who will? We are our own worst enemies. That's why the idea of self-governance is so, so important. I want to look at a couple more questions here. And I appreciate you, Steve, saying what you said. When we talk about disabled veterans, let me just qualify what I said. You pledge your support for this country. You died for this country. You were wounded in action for this country. We should take care of you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people that don't do anything that get a free check because they can. And guess what? The government wants to make that happen. Rome. Oh, the ancient nation of Rome, the empire of Rome. Rome fell. Why did it fall? Did somebody conquer it? No. It fell when it became to the point where we in America really are now. It fell when 30 to 40% of that empire became dependent upon the government, and they stopped contributing. They started taking so much. And instead of giving back into the empire, they expected the empire to give it to them. The factor of that was about 30%. In America, all of our taxes that come into the federal government, let's just call them 100 trillion. Let's just use that number because it's easy to understand. Do we realize that of the $100 trillion that come in through taxes, about 95% of that is given back out in government checks? We're way past 30%, folks. Our country is teetering on the edge of disaster. Many people are predicting an absolute financial collapse. Can't tell you that's not going to happen. But I can tell you that the people, the American people, if we will stand up, we'll figure it out. We always have, and we always will. Folks, we cannot back down and cannot give up hope. I really encourage you to do that. Good comment by Katz tomorrow, I believe. The equity scorecard. Can I tell you something about biblical principle? And Jesus wasn't a socialist. You say, well, what do you mean by that? Wait, what about the parable of the talents? He gave 1 talent, 5 talent, and 10 talents to some of his workers. Now you go, you keep these talents. When I come back, I'll check in with you. The one that gave the 1 buried it. The one with the 5 used it and earned 5 more. The one with the 10 used it and earned 10 more. When he came back, it wasn't about giving back to the guy that buried the 1 his equal share. It wasn't about equity, and it wasn't about equality. It was about getting what you earned. And so he took that from him because he didn't do anything with it, and he gave it to the other ones. Socialism never works. It doesn't. That's not the way it works. The harder you work, the more you ought to be able to get paid. And that's okay. The less you work, the less you should get paid. It's not about equity. It's about working hard, earning a living, becoming self-government. You see where I'm pointing at? And so that's what I want to point out. That's incredible that we need to understand that the government's printing money that they cannot afford and can't back. And unfortunately, when that happens, we begin to become a nation that's absolutely dependent. Now, I want to talk about something right now that I think is important. And I'll wrap up the discussion, take some more questions. I'll finish at the top of the hour, no later, I promise you. Maybe a shad before. When you begin to look at leadership, what is leadership? Leadership is not dictatorship. No, leadership is the ability to listen to all sides of an equation without forming an emotional bond, without forming a bias, making the best decision, knowing full well it might not please every party, and leading on. Leadership is about cutting a path. It's about willing to grab a machete in your hand and cut some rough bushes, even though it make you a little bloody so that other people can walk behind you. You can clear a trail for somebody else. That's leadership. Leadership is not running to the back and hiding. No, leadership is out front. Leadership is taking a chance. Leadership is putting yourself at risk. Leadership, leaders drive a ship. Think about that. Leaders steer a ship. And where the leaders go, the ship will follow. The leader is like a person who's willing to grab that wheel and turn that little rudder one way or the other to get it to move, accepting full responsibility. True leadership is not leadership that says, I'm never wrong. True leadership is having the gut to say, I was wrong when I'm wrong and own it. True leadership is saying words like, I am sorry, or please forgive me. And true leadership is saying that when things do go well, thank you, God, that you gave me direction and guidance and you get all the credit. In my mind, that's leadership, and we need more of that today. We don't need a bunch of argumentative, nonsensical, name-calling stuff anymore. It serves no good purpose. We don't need to incite violence. Although, I will tell you, protect your home, protect your livelihood with your life, with, if need be, as well as the Constitution, as well as defending other people. As a police officer for 24 years, I understand that very well, having seen people die. Now, having said that, let me continue with this idea of leadership. Leadership today is not political oriented. It's not going into an office that's seeking reelection. It's not even going into an office that is seeking to enjoy the ride. Leadership is going to that office to do the job, to serve the people on a part-time basis, knowing full well you're going to go back to work in the workforce when you finish. That's leadership. Kind of sounds like a statesman and stateswoman, doesn't it? We need more people like that, folks. I'm asking you in the next election cycle, if you're supposed to lead and step up, do that. Are you the one that needs to go a little further? Are you that person that needs to do a little more? If that's you, begin to plan and think about that. And if you're a Christian person, pray through that, because we need you to step up. We need you to not lose heart, folks. Please don't lose heart. That's important. The future for my wife and I appreciate that. Matt, thanks for asking. Don't know. We're open to whatever. I have no regrets. My friends, we poured our heart and soul into this race, built some amazing bonds and friendships. But I'm looking across the feed right now, and I'm seeing people like like Steve and David and people that I've met over the course of the way, Johnny and there's Matt. Thank you, Matt. And I see Laura. I see people I've met on the campaign trail, and I'm just like, wow, some amazing friends. And it's overwhelming. So I don't know what we're going to do. We're open for whatever. We've been asked to do a bunch of different things, and we're just frankly and quite transparently praying through those things right now. I did feel led to do this town hall tonight because we need leadership in Oklahoma. We really do. And however that might happen, however that is, I'm going to do it because I feel like we need to bring that clarity forth. And hopefully during this town hall tonight, we've been able to shed a little bit of light on some issues and give a little bit of calm insight, a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of information and knowledge, some reminders. And so I think that's very important. And so I appreciate those of you that tuned in tonight. One more thing I want to talk about, and I think it's very important. The state of the GOP leadership in Oklahoma. Wow, what a confusing mess. You have the GOP that's completely divided across Oklahoma. You have people that are conservative and establishment, and they seem to just devour each other. The establishment tends to just use money as a trump card over people and control people, and the people in the rural Oklahomans get left out. It should not be like that. We have a dysfunctional GOP system right now because of what I just said. We lack clarity, we lack transparency, and frankly, it's heartbreaking because if you read the GOP platform stance, that should be the thing which everybody honors, and that should be the thing which we should be teaching and should be instilling. And if it's not written there clearly, we should clarify things. But if it's written there clearly, we should honor that. And I'm not seeing that even be talked about. Oh, we're talking about fundraising and who's mad at who. And look, leadership does not allow that to happen. Leadership understands there's going to be disagreements and disgruntled people around. That's leadership 101. But leadership continues to lead with a calm spirit and a peaceful demeanor to go on. And I can only hope that we get that somehow across Oklahoma, because right now we don't. It makes me ill. I even saw um, a lot of anger from current leadership across Oklahoma, and we've got to hold our emotions better than that. Leaders may hurt inside. Leaders may be wounded inside. Leaders may want to cry. They may want to yell, but just can't do it. You got to be able to hold together. So I feel like Oklahoma leadership is suffering right now. And folks, hear my heart. If the GOP doesn't fix itself and doesn't get a revelation wake-up call, it will collapse. It will be continue to be splintered, and it will become nothing more than a plane that's going down and is destined to failure. I can only hope that we can turn that around. Let's see if there's any more comments on here. Yeah, good. Steve brought up a question about bringing other people on here. Yes, I've thought about that. And to that point, lots of comments on here, and I do appreciate all your kind words, and thank you for that. If you want more of these type of town hall events like this, with subject matter like this, to keep us informed, to keep us hopefully grounded a little bit, hopefully I can become a voice that is a sounding board for people, maybe, that provides a little bit of help under the storm. My wife and I have always been, I guess, called, you might say, to bring calm in the middle of a storm, because we do that in people's lives. You know, people are looking for us for help, and we try to give them some help in the middle of a storm. So, hopefully we can do that. And if you want more of these, well, one more thing I want to answer here. Katz, thank you for this. What are we going to do about China's land grab? Very good point. I didn't address that. I failed to do that one, so that's my fault. Very quickly, China has already bought too much land in Oklahoma. Governor Stitt knew that. Happened under his nose. Unacceptable. No excuse necessary. No excuse accepted. It's not okay. Over 300,000 acres purchased in Oklahoma. Not to be done. Oh, yeah, we stopped the marijuana licensing fiasco temporarily, but my suspicion is it's because November's coming. My advice for that is to wear out the phone, email, and the door of your representatives, to keep them pushing bills forward. The more you push your representative, the more you can. The more you push your sheriff to know this Constitution, the better he or she can represent you well and put a stop to that. I think it's really, really important. Let me make sure I haven't missed any questions here at all from anyone. I don't believe I have. Go back. Lots of good comments here. I appreciate that so very much. Yep. Okay, good. Good comments, everyone. I appreciate you. It's now 2 minutes till. Let me just sign off with this particular charge. Get involved. Get involved. Don't sit back and do nothing. You, me, we're all called to do something. As long as we have breath, as long as we have life, we're called to do something. That something is to be involved. Now, are you called to run for office? Is everybody called to do that? No. But are we all called to be Americans? Yeah, we really are. And Americans, we stand together. Even if we disagree in some areas, we stand together for the principles that bind us together. And that's freedom and liberty for everyone. As I said earlier, you can't have freedom and liberty unless you have the awareness of a moral code. So it should be freedom plus liberty plus morality equals the spirit and the epitome of this constitutional republic. We, the people, are the governors of the government. Remember our order of authority: God, man, society, government. Get back to the basics of self-government by realizing the principles, one day at a time. Don't become a dependent of the government, because the more you become a dependent of them, the more they own you. Don't be ignorant. All the things we talked about tonight, you can't forget that you know it, because now you know it. So you can't unknow it. Use that information wisely. You may not have agreed with everything I've said, and that's okay. But just know that for my wife and I, we still love you very much, and we're glad, so honored that you were here. And healthy discussions like this are great. They're great, even if there's not 100% agreement, because it brings us to the light of thinking again. So no one can accuse us of being ignorant. We need to stand right now. And as the opening bell tolled on this talk, I'll close it like this. I'm going to go a little bit further, and I'm going to do more. I don't want to sit back and be a part of the problem. I'm going to continue to step up and do what I can. Won't you do the same thing? Won't you step up? Won't you do a little more and go a little bit further? I appreciate you joining us tonight. If you want these to continue in some form or fashion and even want to suggest subject matter, I encourage you to do that. Don't forget about the conservative, concerned grassroots people that are gathering together at Spring Hill Suites next Monday night in Oklahoma City between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And I appreciate so much you being here tonight. Keep your comments coming. I'll be monitoring the feed for a while. May God bless you, and may God bless, and He does, these United States of America. Good night.
Greatness shows up after you're tired. Let's say it one more time, man. Greatness shows up after you're tired, not when you're tired. And breakthroughs don't happen until you reach your breaking point. Been there many times, man, at that place I didn't want to go on, and I realized that strength can't develop until your strength is gone. You got to keep pushing, because character and courage is developed or lost when you decide to keep going or to give up. You see, that's the point. You got to stop, and you got to realize that's your breakthrough coming right there, because when others that are around you won't, you will be the one that goes ahead. Somebody has to step up and go a little bit farther. Is that somebody you? How many says that's me? I want to go a little farther.